Good afternoon, everybody. It's okay? Okay. So it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure to welcome you today at Carnegie Middle East Center in Beirut. I am Lulwa Al-Rashid Carnegie Scholar, and I will be chairing this timely and much-needed event on Algeria. It is organized by my colleague Dalia Ghanem, who is our in-house expert on Algeria. Dalia has gathered three distinguished colleagues, academics and experts, to analyze and discuss with you events in Algeria. We will be focusing, of course, on the social hirak, the mobilization since February 22nd in Algeria. And we will start our panel with Dalia, who will be focusing on the social dynamics and the role of the Algerian military in the Hirak. And I strongly recommend you to read Dalia's latest paper on the shifting foundations of political Islam in Algeria. It is on display outside of this conference room, and it has been released a couple of weeks ago, actually maybe a week ago, I think. So Dalia, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lulwa. Hi, everyone. Very happy to organize this event, and thank you for my colleagues for being here. So I'm going to talk a bit about the Hirak, give some general information about it. I was lucky enough to be part of it, as the Hirak started actually on February 22nd, and I had the chance to fly back to Algeria on the 24th and to attend what came to be called the first demonstration, which was Al-Mudahara Al-Milyoniya, which was the million demonstration. So few remarks on the movement. The first thing that has been, catching the attention, and sorry, these are pictures that I took on several occasions. It's from February 22nd to March 31st. I attended 3 or 4 demonstrations, and I've taken these pictures myself. So the first thing that was very interesting about the Hirak was the peaceful nature of the Hirak. I think it is something that has been, on all mouths. Algerians took up to the street, and they did it in a very peaceful way. So the question that I had at the beginning with journalists saying, do you think violence is going to erupt? And I have always the same answer. The risk zero doesn't exist. However, one has to keep in mind that it's been 12 weeks of peaceful protest. What was very interesting about it is that we are here in front of politically savvy people. When Algerians took up to the street on February 22nd, they knew that they were going against the law, as it is not allowed to demonstrate in Algeria. It is forbidden, and yet they did it. They did it with their fathers and mother and kids on their shoulder, and it was very joyful protest. However, one could feel the determination of the people. So it was also cross-generational. I know that we've spoke a lot about youth in Algeria, but this is due to the demographic makeup of the Algerian population. 55% of Algeria's population is under age 25. So of course it was mainly youth, but it wasn't only. I myself, I marched with my cousins, with my mother, with my uncle. So it was cross-generation. And I think this is very important to note, because it is also the former generation who is saying no. A third feature is that the movement has been also cross-national. At the beginning, people thought this is only the capital, Algiers, but actually no. The protests spread all over the country. I was lucky enough to travel 800 kilometers from the capital, and I stopped at different big cities in Algeria. I stopped in Borj Bouarririj, in Stif, in Qsentina, and so on and so forth. And each time I had the chance to talk to people and to ask them about the protests. Are you going to protest this Friday? And I have the same sentence again and again coming back, which was, after all, we are all Algerians, so yes. So it is cross-national, cross-generational, cross-classes. I've seen unemployed people demonstrating, but I've seen also judges and lawyers and students. Now the question is beyond the beautiful, beyond the moving, because, you know, it was very moving to attend that. And as I said it several times, we are witnessing in Algeria a very unique moment. These events are very unique in the sense that we haven't seen Algerian gathering like that and united since maybe the 90s. Of course, what is also very striking is that at the beginning, the demand was very focused and very clear. Algerians took up to the street because they didn't want President Bouteflika to run for a 5th term, right? But then it is the disdain and the contempt of the Algerian regime towards its population that made the demand scale up. So we went from no to the 5th term of Bouteflika, to no to Bouteflika and his clan, to no to the 3 Bs, to the overhaul of the Algerian system. And I think it is the incapacity of the regime to respond to the demands that made the demand scale up week after week. But of course, so as I said, beyond that, the question that imposes itself is what's next? So this movement is leaderless. There is no leader in this movement, and Algerians are very adamant about keeping the movement leaderless. They don't want a leader, which is, in a sense, a very smart move, because when you don't have a leader, you can't put him in jail, you can co-opt him, you can't marginalize him. But it is also the weak point of this movement, how the movement is going, you know, to resist time, how the movement is not going to fade away. I always give this example of the bulldozer revolution in Serbia that was able actually to get the country rid of Slobodan Milosevic. But unfortunately, after him stepping down, the movement just faded away and it couldn't resist time. So what the movement has to do in order to keep itself alive, that's a question. I think the first thing, and I will end up on that, is that it needs to remain peaceful. That is a very important condition. Any type of violence is going to alienate people and is going to give this image, this very negative image. And as a matter of fact, Algerians are very aware of that. One of the things that many protesters told me on the street of Algiers was, we don't want to be like the Gilets jaunes. We don't want to be like the yellow vest in France. We don't want to be violent. We don't want to have this negative image. So we need to remain calm. But of course, you know, there was some tentative by the regime to dispatch, you know, henchmen and to have some kind of provocation that didn't work. So this is the first condition, to remain peaceful. And the second condition, while I think that not having a leader has been successful to a certain extent, now we are entering a different phase when maybe we need to think about a collegial leadership. The movement need maybe to think about choosing 10 to 15, maybe 20 people who are from different background, from different, background of the society, of the classes, and employed and not, and to make sure that the leadership has actually a strong actor to discuss with. Because until now, for instance, Gaid Saleh, who is the chief of staff, can argue that I don't have anyone to talk to. I am not going to talk to 35 million of Algerians. So you need to give me a leader. You need to give me somebody to talk to. So I think that's the next phase for the movement to better organize itself. To actually, the movement in a nutshell needs a minimum of institutionalization.
Thank you, Dalia, for this exhaustive presentation about the logic and the dynamics of the Hirak, particularly the fact that it has remained so far leaderless and quite unorganized. But on the other side, I mean, who is running the change within the regime? Is it still the military? Is it Gaid Saleh? You spoke of the 3 Bs. So can you please expand more on the 3 Bs and their apparent exclusion from the political arena?
Yes, well, that's the million-dollar question. Who is running the country? We don't know, Algerians. For the last 20 years, we didn't know really who was running the country. But I think this is a very, very tough question to answer in the sense that we are in the front of a regime that is highly opaque and highly complex. As I said it several times, and I wrote it in my New York Times piece, I said it's not a one-man show. Behind Bouteflika, there is an entire regime, because people kept asking, this is absurd, why a man who is that sick is running? And I said, again, this is not a one-man show. So when we think about the Algerian regime, we need to think about it as a pyramid. It's a pyramidal system. At the top of the pyramid, there is the military institution. But of course, we tend to talk about the military institution as it was very homogeneous, while it is not. It is penetrated by different, conflict, personal conflict of interest, and there is factions also in the military. But at the top of the pyramid, there is some military leaders that are actually taking and calling the shots. And then you have the second layer, which is the FLN, apparatchik, the bureaucracy. And then you have a third layer, which is the business tycoon. And all these different actors have several interests, political and economic, divergent interests, and allegiances are very, very fluid in Algeria. Today, friend can be tomorrow's enemy. We've seen that with the chief of the FCE, which is the Forum des Chefs d'Entreprise, Ali Haddad, who has been one of the biggest supporters of Bouteflika, and then he turned his allegiances, and he's been put in jail a few days after declaration that didn't please the leadership. So it's very complex, but if I have to answer that question, I would say that it's the military. The military in Algeria are not governing, but they are ruling the country. And they have been ruling the country since the independence in 1962. And I think today we saw it, because today, for the first time, we have the military with Gaid Saleh actually ruling the country openly. It is Gaid Saleh who we hear about, and who is calling the shot. So I think one quote that would just definitely and thoroughly summarize and answer your question, Lulua, is a quote from one of the most famous Algerian historian, that was Mohammed Harbi, who said in a book, all states in the world have a military, but in Algeria, the military have a state.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Dalia. So if I understood you well, unlike their Sudanese counterparts, the Algerian military are still there, quite unresponsive to the demands for change. And now we will turn to economics with Amel Belaid, who is a consultant. She is the founder of Apotheox, a consultancy firm in Algiers, and she is as well the vice president of CARE, which is an economic think tank also based in Algiers. Amel will be discussing the economic context in Algeria. Amel, the floor is yours.
Right, so thank you, Lulu, and thank you, Dalia, for the introduction. Actually, the challenge is today, although these protests seem to be political in their nature, but they actually include an economic dimension. And as many economists and many experts said, if the economy was in a better shape, maybe the size and the mass of the protest would be different. And why are we saying this? Today, actually, whomever is going to take over from the government in place and who will lead the transition will inherit actually of a very severe economic crisis in the making. I'm saying in the making because we're not there yet, but a statu quo can accelerate this process. So what they will have to face is to take the real unpopular measures that the previous governments and the previous political elite has been reluctant to take, just in order to reach an elections calendar, and also taking advantage of a short period of time increase of the oil barrel price and its impact on the Algerian economic. So the risky economic policy that they choose to take has led to a very, very vulnerable economy that we have today. So what will happen next? I mean, just to give you some background of the economic status. This situation has already started 5 years ago. It's not new. And it had not waited for this hundreds of thousands of Algerians to go on the street claiming for a political change. But what happened at that time is that the social stability was bought at the expensive price of a very generous subsidy system. And this has led the economy to deteriorate very slowly, but in a very dangerous fashion. So what had happened? First of all, we have seen our macroeconomics deteriorating on a very quick fashion. We have seen several dimensions of it going down. So first of all, the level of the economic growth. So it went from levels of 5 to 6% in the previous decade to what now doesn't exceed or roughly touches the level of 3% of growth. The other D that is depleting is the depletion of the financial or the foreign exchange financial reserves. The financial reserves that are linked to the income from the oil and gas exports that constitutes not less than 95% of the earnings have depleted from a level of 200 billion US dollars not later than 2013 to reach the level of less than 90 billion. So we're talking today about a projection of 68 billion US dollar by the end of 2019. We are also seeing the public debt reaching unseen levels. So it has also raised from 1.3% back in 2013 to the level of 16% starting from 2016. So this is another issue that we are facing. So all the public finance is getting unhealthy. And what the government in place to avoid the painful measures and the structural reforms has chosen to do is to start to implement short-term solutions. And one of them was doping the economy, having recourse to the very dangerous printing press. And why I say very dangerous? I mean, this printing press has now reached the accumulated amount of something that is getting close to 28% of the GDP. And it was not done to finance investment. It was not done to diversify the economy. It has not been made also to help to develop faster the economy, but to finance actually the wastes in the budget that are going to the public budget. And the other point also that we have seen really going in a very dangerous manner is the inflation that is escalating by 1% every year. So now we are reaching a level that is close to 6%, and the escalation will continue until 2020, according to the IMF projections. And last but not least, the impact of the lack of diversification and of the lack of efficiency of the economic policy that the system in place has conducted has led to a very high level of unemployment. The level of employment has reached today the level of 11.7%. And actually this level is more or less can compare to the average of the region, although I mean there are some disparities with in North Africa with Tunisia. But if we look more thoroughly into it, this unemployment touches more of the youth population. And knowing that, bearing in mind that the youth population, so people, the population under the age of 30 years old reach 65% of the population. And if we consider that the unemployment rate of this population has reached from 26 to 28%, adding to this the lack of inclusion of women to the labor force, and we have only one woman occupied out of the 5 working force. So this lack of inclusion has really linked actually the two crises. So, and this is where the two crises connect, the political plus the economic. Because what this social movement claims now is that, of course, the major claim is to dismantle totally the political system in place, because they believe that it's inherently corrupted, it's not allowing an economic inclusion and equal opportunities, and it has created a kind of business elite or economic elite that concentrated all the wealth between the hands of a business elite that is a crony elite that was generated by a corrupted system.
Okay, well, thank you, Amel, for this very frightening picture of the Algerian economy. So, if political inclusion seems to be highly unlikely, given the reluctance of the military to relinquish their power, economic inclusion seems even more unlikely, given the structural challenges that the Algerian economy faces. But what kind of new social and economic contract can the regime, or whoever happens to be Bouteflika's successor, what kind of new social and economic contract can they offer? I mean, can the rentier state model in Algeria survive the demands for change and economic inclusion?
Yes. Well, actually, no, the rentier state cannot survive anymore, not because we don't want to, but it's just because the financial situation cannot allow it. We can't afford it anymore. So whomever is going to take over will have to be very competent, will have to be technocratic to run this economic measures, to run structural economic reforms, and will also have to be backed up by the population, because it will be very difficult to bring a population of 43 million that we use to a generous subsidy system to a situation where we will ask for their resilience and we will ask for their trust to go through very difficult times and challenging times. Indeed, I mean, this new government or regime will have to build it up and to show that, or to be inclusive and participative in building a consensual roadmap. And thankfully, what we have today is that many proposals have been made, not today because of the Iraq, but they started to anticipate this upcoming crisis, and most of them converge. So this is the positive thing. And the second thing is that out of the several proposals that are already that were even conveyed to the knowledge of the government in place, one of them is quite distinguished, and if I may cite one example, that is the one that we have conducted with my think tank, is a consensual and participative moral roadmap. So this can serve as a basis for a future discussion. So if we go through, let's say, national meetings for a political transition, it has on a very urgent way to be run in parallel to an economic transition. And this roadmap, as I mentioned, that has been drafted today. It's actually 2 years old, but as long as there was a statu quo, nothing was made, so it is still up to date. And this has collected most people's concern, it was inclusive of all the economic sectors. It was inclusive of all the propositions from different business organizations, and it has already shown the main axis that we could start from.
Just roughly describe what's the logic of this economic plan.
The National Business Agenda has actually identified the major axes of the structural reforms. And if I would cite maybe 3 priorities, it would be the governance, it would be the modernization of the financial system, and it's also working on bureaucracy and working on against the over-centralized system that we have.
Okay, thank you very much, Amel. And now we will turn to Younes Abouyoub. Younes is currently the head of the MENA Governance and State Building Department at the UN ESCWA in Beirut. He is also a former political advisor to the UN Special Envoy in Libya, Tariq Mitri. And Younes will discuss a topic that is not directly linked, or apparently that is not directly linked to the Hirak, that is Algerian foreign policy towards its problematic neighbor, Libya, since 2011. Younes, the floor is yours.
Lolo. After this overview of what's happening in Algeria, basically I was asked to discuss the Algerian foreign policy at the regional level, and mainly as regards Libya. Well, to start with, we have to know what are the fundamentals of the Algerian foreign policy towards Libya since 2011. And I start with the 3 principles that guided Algeria's foreign policy towards the crisis. The first one is that from the outset, Algeria never wanted a military solution to the crisis in Libya. The second, an insistence on the territorial integrity of Libya as a nation state, meaning it never wanted Libya to be split on a quota system, regional or ethnic background. And the third one is I said the non-intervention, the territorial integrity, and inclusive solution. Inclusive political solution in the sense that Algeria never wanted a solution of one political faction victorious over another. And this comes from its domestic experience. Let's remember in the 90s, after the Black Decade, Algeria did not resolve the situation by, or not only by security means, but mostly by dialogue by the end, an inclusive process. And that's basically what Bouteflika managed to do. And this is the way Algeria perceives the crisis in Libya. The Algerian government sees that even if political Islam in Libya is not a current that has a majority, did not even win the elections, they still have the right to be represented in some sort of power-sharing agreement. While its neighbors from the east, Egypt, does not perceive that solution the same way. And also it's from its domestic perception. The way the 2 countries that are quite rival in dealing with the Libyan issue perceives things from completely different angles. Egypt sees the military solution as the way to deal with the presence of any Islamist parties in Libya. For Algeria, they prefer an approach that's based on a wider inclusion and dialogue, not because they want the Islamists to be in the government, but because they think it's the only way to avoid a major escalation of violence that will affect both Algeria and Tunisia on the western side. And you will see since 2012, 2013, Algeria has been trying to negotiate a solution, including Egypt and Tunisia. We've had many meetings between the 3 countries that were held in Tunisia, but they never really reached an agreement. And we've seen recently with Hirak starting in Algeria, a sudden movement of troops under Haftar from the east to the west, which is, in my opinion, and also I think a lot of observers have said the same thing, that it was basically an opportunity to be taken, to be seized by the Haftar forces and those behind him to move towards the west, knowing that that Algeria is busy with its own domestic affairs now and will not be able to stop it. But even saying that, I think whatever happens with the situation in Algeria in the future, I think Haftar knows very well that he cannot stay in Tripoli if he ever goes into Tripoli or control the western side of Libya without the consent of Algeria.
Thank you. Thank you, Yunus. Maybe a question about Algeria's relationship to Libyan Islamists. Who are they? I mean, what kind of relations are there? I mean, isn't it surprising to see a country which has fought fiercely any manifestation of political Islam be willing to insist on their inclusion in its borders? What's your?
Well, the rationale, as I said earlier, Algeria does not want either Haftar to control all of Libya or the Islamists to control Libya. They don't have a particular preference for a certain ideology. What they want is stability, a balance, and a political solution that will avoid more escalation, more violence in the future. Because Algeria sees itself now being surrounded by what's happening in Libya and also what's happening in Sahel with all the different Islamist movements. So for them, they want to contain this type of movement and try to play a divide and conquer policy. If you include certain Islamist group within the political process, that will distinguish them from those who are hardliners, violent-prone ones. For instance, Algeria does not see the Muslim Brotherhood in Libya as a terrorist or an extremist movement. They see them as a political party, which is one of the contentious bones with Egypt. Egyptians do not see them that way. You will see, for instance, from the beginning that Algeria has invited Ismail and Ali Salabi to Algeria for meetings. Even the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group, Libya al-Muqatila with Abdelhakim Belhaj, many times. But at the same time, they also always maintain channels, open channels with everyone else. They invited Haftar, they invited the representative of the parliament in Tobruk. So when Algiers deals with Haftar, let's not forget that at the beginning, the first 2 months of the Dignity Operation, Al-Karama, they supported it. But when they saw that it's becoming messier and it's taking more time or more violence, and when they saw that there's other forces, not from the region, behind Haftar, bombing, for instance, the international airport at Tripoli, then they resented that type of international influence in what's called what maybe Algeria considers its backyard. So at the end, to sum up, to answer your question, it's not, they don't oppose or include the Islamists because they like them. They don't oppose Haftar per se, they oppose his methods, not ideologically. They want stability, they want to protect both Algeria and Tunisia.
So maybe they oppose also Haftar's supporters. I mean, those who behind the scenes are, financing and supporting.
And especially
militarily.
Egypt, because traditionally Algeria has always perceived Libya as part of the Maghreb. They might concede the fact that eastern Libya is part of the influence of Egypt, but they never wanted Egypt to move towards the west. Now you have also France that is behind supporting Haftar military approach, and then that means that the Algerians perceive France having more and more control and influence in North Africa and in the Sahel, as if it's being besieged both from the east and from the south. So they don't accept that type of politics. Traditional realpolitik in national geopolitics commanding Algeria's attitude vis-à-vis Libya. Thank you very much, Yunus. And now we will turn to
Haytham Amira Fernandez, who is a senior analyst at Elcano Royal Institute in Madrid. Haytham has focused on North African countries and on Mediterranean relations, I would say. Haytham will be discussing the regional and international context for the Hirak in Algeria. Haytham?
Thank you, Lola. Thank you to Carnegie, Dalia, for organizing this and for you to be here with us today. So just to remind the audience about Algeria and the importance of Algeria, it's a few facts. Algeria is the largest country, member state of the Arab League, the largest in size. It is also the largest country in Africa and the entire continent, and the largest country around the Mediterranean basin. That already gives you some impression of what the country is and the dimensions. It has land borders of about 6,300 kilometers with neighboring countries, and the coastal line of about 1,600 kilometers as well. It's a big country, 42, 44 million inhabitants, a median age of 27, 28 years, and a life expectancy of the entire population, life expectancy of 76 years. So it is important, it's relevant, it has to be taken into account. A few notes on the regional context where this Hirak and this mobilization is happening currently in Algeria. Well, obviously, we all know in 2011, the so-called Arab Spring or Arab Awakening started, and it seemed like it was something that was concentrated in a certain period of time, and that it came to an end, and very few success stories, and some thought that that was over, it was closed. There was a return to the authoritarian stability model that prevailed before. The regional context also includes the Maghreb, Yunus was referring to, a region that lacks, I would say, some of the most basic elements of regional integration anywhere in the world. Closed borders, very little intra-regional trade, relations, contacts, human exchanges, etc. That is the region where Algeria belongs, the immediate region, not to mention the Mediterranean or Euro-Mediterranean region. Also, the regional context. There's a very strong resistance nowadays, and we've seen it growing, strong resistance to change that could lead to some sort of more democratic and representative political systems in the region. So if there were revolutions, I'm not sure if there were revolutions in 2011, well, the counter-revolutions are being felt now in different parts of the region very strongly. With the support of some regional powers or rising powers in the region as well. There's also a breakdown or a collapse or gradual increasing collapse of the social contracts in different parts of the region, different levels and degrees. But we see this as something that is growing, and all the projections, socioeconomic projections tell us that it will be very, very difficult to keep those so-called social contracts, because I doubt that they were contracts from the beginning. It was not something negotiated and agreed by different states and societies. Maybe there was an authoritarian bargain. So you exchange some freedoms, liberties in exchange for, security and certain subsidies and other things. So how is Algeria viewed in this environment it belongs to? Algeria has been considered for many years as a pivot state in the Mediterranean and in Africa due to its economic, its military, and geopolitical importance, which means that any abrupt change in that country would have repercussions regionally and even for the international system to a large extent. For a decade, we've seen that Algeria's role and relevance in the international scene was diminished. It disappeared from a lot of international fora. Its activity that used to be very much focused to the outside world was diminished even at the continental level in Africa. And that was due mostly to the fact that the president was unable to perform most of the functions of the head of state or to travel abroad, except if it was to the hospital in Europe. So that means that the country is not in the situation that was the natural environment in which it's operated for many years. Now, Algeria and Sudan have been telling us the populations for the past few weeks, months, in the case of Sudan a bit longer, that the status quo that some thought was established through authoritarian means is no longer guaranteed. That whoever thought that the Arab awakening was over, that most likely it's not over. There are elements, ingredients that are present with all the differences here and there, but they're still present, and that is making populations react. One important factor that we have to keep in mind when looking at Algeria and also Sudan, and maybe for the future some other countries, is the fear factor that has been used by regimes, especially when looking at Syria and Yemen. The fear factor of telling the populations, hey, don't go down that road because you will bring chaos, destruction, and all sorts of bad things to the country, to you, to the society. That has not worked, at least not in the way that the Algerian regime wanted to use to prevent mobilization. Not only because it's illegal to demonstrate in large numbers without permission, if you ever get permission, but because the population, as Dalia said, acted in a rather mature way, politically mature way, to ask for those rights, for changes, and to say, we're fed up, we're done, and we feel humiliated, and you cannot go on humiliating us the way you've done it.
Okay, thank you, Haytham. So, are we witnessing a more mature second Arab awakening or Arab Spring? Starting from Algeria, extending to Sudan, and possibly to other countries in the MENA?
Well, this is a big question. I mean, especially for many observers, analysts, governments who are looking at the region to see if this is a new wave of social mobilizations that lead to political change and transformations in different countries. I don't know if this is a second Arab Spring, but in my opinion, and there's a term that I learned recently, surprisingly, and that I like, it's called the Arabellion. So the Arabellion, the rebellion of Arabs. Most likely we are seeing a resurgent Arabellion, because those revolts, the rebellion against the status quo, against systems that are no longer capable to deliver, and that populations, when they project at the individual, collective level, family levels to the future, they see that they won't be able to continue delivering, at least the way they did in the past. That was not impressive anyhow. So most likely this is a reminder that the causes that produced the revolts in 2011, socioeconomic, and this I think it's the heart at any mobilization, that it's not only that they have not been solved, but they, in some cases, they're even worse. Situations have worsened, populations are growing, the number of young people seeking opportunities and jobs is still on the rise, because we haven't seen a demographic transition yet in most of the societies of the region, and that people realize that those who are leading corrupt regimes are hurting them, and they're trying to change that. How it will happen, we don't know, but that move and that push is still there.
Thank you. Maybe another question, if you allow me. What's Europe's take on this new wave of rebellions in the Arab world and in Algeria in particular?
Well, obviously for Europe, Western Europe, for the EU, for individual countries within the EU, especially France in this case, Spain, the country I come from, whatever happens in North Africa is a priority, is a strategic, of maximum strategic importance for Europe, for the northern shore of the Mediterranean, for different reasons. Obviously, domestic politics is one reason, because whenever there's a irregular flow of people moving from the southern shore of the Mediterranean northwards, migration, refugees, then it has a political impact and consequences and the cost to governments, but also because of energy supplies. In the case of Spain, about 57% of natural gas consumed in Spain comes from Algeria. So it's over one half of the total natural gas, which is used widely in the country. So any disruption would have immediate and direct impact on the country and obviously on social, on conditions for society. Terrorism, violence, other things that are still there in the memory of many, be thinking of Algeria back in the terrible decade of the 90s, that is that's creating a lot of, well, let's say fear in a way. And among policymakers in Europe, they have been extremely cautious, and I have to underline this. Even some other neighbors, Morocco and some cautious at making statements for the past 12 months. Some governments haven't even made a single official statement for 12 weeks on what's happening in Algeria, out of fear of being seen as interfering or doing something wrong. The French president at some point, Mr. Macron, supported the fact that the president of Bouteflika was not running for fifth term. It was not well taken by many in Algeria, so I think that was a lesson for others. Just don't say anything, just watch, prepare. And the positive thing, and I would like also to highlight this, and Dalia mentioned it, the peaceful nature of demonstrations, the civic attitude of those who have been taken to the streets all over the country for 12 weeks, I think in a way has been watched from Europe in a kind of surprised way. Algerians can do it peacefully. This is good news, especially if compared to the the yellow vests in France. Surprise, surprise, things maybe don't turn out the way some expected. But yeah, there's a lot of expectation and mixed with a certain degree of anxiety.
Okay, thank you very much. The floor is open to your questions. Yes, please.
سؤال للسيدة داليا حول الصراع الفرنسي الأمريكي في الجيش الجزائري وما هو تأثيره على مستقبل الحراك في الجزائر، وهذا ما بدأ من خلال التوقيفات التي حصلت لبعض رموز النظام السابق وهي مقربة من الفرنسيين، على سبيل المثال سعيد بوتفليقة والآخرين. مسألة أخرى، يبدو أن قائد الجيش هو الأكثر قوة في الجزائر المستقبلي. ألا تعتقدين أن المناورات التي يقوم بها تشكل محاولة جديدة لما ذكره السيد هيثم حول الثورة المضادة للحراك الشعبي؟ شكرا.
No? Okay, so Dalia.
طب حأجيب باللغة العربية. أنا لا أظن أن في صراع فرنسي أمريكي بقلب منظومة الجيش الجزائري. نحن نحكي هون على صراع جزائري بيحدث بين مختلف الفئات التي تكون الجيش الجزائري. صحيح أنه في محاولات تدخل من طرف بعض الدول، ولكن لا يمكنني اليوم أن أقول بكل وضوح من الذي يتدخل، كيف يتدخل وغير ذلك. ولكن الشيء المهم هو أن منظومة الجيش الجزائري هي منظومة نتكلم عنها بطريقة وكأنها تشكل وكأنها جسد واحد، وهي الأمر ليس كذلك. تتكون من مختلف الرجال، من مختلف الفئات، من مختلف كمان في صراعات داخلية عويصة ما بين مختلف الفئات الذين يؤيدون بوتفليقة والبعض لا يؤيد بوتفليقة. ولكن صحيح أن اليوم الأزمة في الجزائر أظهرت أن الرجل القوي في الجزائر اليوم هو القايد صالح. السؤال الذي يطرح نفسه هو إلى أي مدى يمكن لقايد صالح أن ينحاز إلى الشعب، أن يقوم بتنازلات للشعب، أن يحافظ على مكانه، أن يحافظ على هؤلاء الذين أيدوه. هذا هو السؤال. اليوم الشارع الجزائري يرفض رفضا باتا أن يكون القايد صالح رجل المرحلة الانتقالية. لما خرجت مع الجزائريين في مارس 22 ومارس 31 كان الشعار واضحا: روح روح يا بوتفليقة ودي معاك قايد صالح، يعني فل يا بوتفليقة وخذ معك قايد صالح. الشعار الثاني كان قايد صالح غير صالح. يعني واضح أنه القايد صالح لا يمكن أن يكون الرجل المرحلة الانتقالية ويجب عليه أن يرحل. اليوم الجيش الجزائري ليس جيش التسعينيات، هو أكثر تطورا، أكثر حداثة، في ضباط اليوم في سن أقل من قايد صالح يمكنهم أن يتخذون القرارات وغير ذلك. وأظن أن الطريقة الوحيدة من أجل أن تمر الجزائر بمرحلة انتقالية بطريقة سلمية هي أولا رحيل قايد صالح، ورحيل كذلك الرموز السابقة للنظام. يطالب الجزائريين على سبيل المثال رحيل الباءات الثلاثة اللي هي عبد القادر بن صالح اللي هو الرئيس الحالي للجزائر، معاذ بوشارب اللي هو رئيس جبهة التحرير الوطني الأفلان، وأخيرا بدوي اللي هو الوزير الأول. إذن الطريقة الوحيدة هي رحيل الباءات الثلاثة، رحيل قايد صالح. وأظن كذلك يجب على المنظومة العسكرية في مرحلة ما أن تقوم باتخاذ قرارات صارمة، ألا وهي لا يمكن للجزائر أن تقوم اليوم بانتخابات رئاسية. فكرة هذه الانتخابات الرئيسية في 4 جولاي 2019 أظن أنها سنرتكب خطأ كبير. نتذكر كلنا في هذه القاعة ماذا صار في ليبيا بعد الانتخابات. الانتخابات ليست دائما هي الحل، وليست دائما هي الجزائريين اليوم ليسوا قادرين على الذهاب إلى قاعات الانتخابات. السؤال الذي يطرح نفسه هو على أي شخص حينتخب المواطن الجزائري اليوم؟ يعني إذا انتخبنا اليوم ويوم 4 جويليا سنعطي للنظام فرصة على تجديد نفسه وعلى تجديد الأشخاص السابقين.
شكرا. تفضل.
هو بالحقيقة سؤالين، يعني سؤال للسيدة أمل وسؤال آخر للسيدة داليا، حول هل الجيش قادر على اتخاذ هذا القرار؟ لأن المنظومة أو المعادلة التي سرت في الربيع العربي إن في سوريا أو في ليبيا أو في غير مناطق هي موقع الجيش. إذا انحاز الجيش للسلطة دخلنا في حرب أهلية. إذا اتخذ الجيش موقف إلى جانب الشعب أو محايدا يعني مرت الأمور كما هي في مصر وفي تونس وإلى ما هنالك إلى مراحل انتقالية قد تكون طويلة. هل الجيش قادر على اتخاذ هذا القرار أم أن هناك، ولذلك سألت عن الصراعات داخل قوى الجيش. نرى أن القائد صالح يذهب كل أسبوع إلى ولاية ليجتمع مع الجيش ويجري مناورات ويعيد ترتيب الجيش من الداخل، وهو مقرب كما يقال إلى السلطات الأمريكية التي دخلت بعد أحداث 2000 وبعد الأحداث السابقة لتكون المستثمر الأقوى في الجزائر. فهل الجيش قادر على اتخاذ هذه المبادرة، يؤجل الانتخابات، يشكل مجلس رئاسي كما هو مقترح من الجيش، ونعود لنقع في نفس الأزمة السودانية الحاصلة اليوم؟ من سيكون له الأكثرية، الجيش أم وإلى ما هنالك؟ سؤال آخر حول النظام الاقتصادي في الجزائر. أنا ذهبت إلى الجزائر عام 2013، وسابقا كنت عندما تولى بوتفليقة لمدة أشهر. الاقتصاد الجزائري مجمد يعني فقط عام 2013 رأيت بعض المناطق التي يدخلها الأعمار الجديد. أما الجزائر بلد يعني رغم كل المقومات الاقتصادية هو بلا اقتصاد، الشعب تلهث في مكانه، وهذا الجزء الأساسي للحراك الذي يجري. فهل باعتقادك قادر الشعب على الاستمرار في هذه التظاهرات وفي هذا الحراك فيما لو استمر هذا التعطيل القائم للاقتصاد الحالي أيضا؟
هل الجيش قادر؟ طب حأجيب باللغة الإنجليزية لأن كتبت كتير بالموضوع على باللغة الإنجليزية. Well, the question is not whether the army can take the decision. The question is why it would be in the interest of the army to take such a decision. We are talking here about an army that has been holding in power since the liberation of the country in 1962. Today, it's not only Gaid Saleh who has to decide, even though he is the strong man of this transitional period. But then again, we are, in a way, and I want to say it in a very positive way, I think in Algeria we are witnessing a renegotiation of civil-military relationships. We are in like a tango dance. You know, for the last 12 weeks, we've been seeing the people going up to the street asking for something and then the military answering, making concession. Till now, the concessions have been made and demands have been answered. Till which extent they are going to answer these demands? I think we are going to reach a point where the army will say, enough is enough. We made a lot of concessions and we can't make. Because I think we are, nothing in the history of Algeria, in the history of modern Algeria, show us that the military are going to be able to just let go of power and come back to their barracks and, you know, play this only security role. I think we are really far from that, unfortunately. I think we are reaching a more, we are moving towards more a scenario when the military are going to, you know, hold their grip on power at any cost. And the best maybe way to do it, and this is the secret behind the longevity of the Algerian regime and the Algerian military, is making concession without really doing real change. You know, I wrote it in my in a paper, in a Carnegie paper in 2017 called "Limiting Change Through Change," in which I start my paper with a quote from an Italian writer, Giuseppe de Lampedusa, who wrote a beautiful novel called "The Leopard." And Giuseppe de Lampedusa says, "If we want things to stay as they are, no, if we want things to change, we need to keep things as they are." And this exactly summarizes how the Algerian regime and the military has been working. You know, they make concession in timely period, but without making deep concession. بالعربي بيعملوا تغييرات ولكن التغييرات شكلية وليست جوهرية. A good example of that is the military have been able, and the regime has been able to weather several crises in modern Algeria. October 5th, 1988, Black Decade, 10 years of civil war. 2001, the riots in Kabylia. 2011, the Arab Spring. And 2014, the drop in oil prices. And they are still here. So I think they will be able to weather this crisis. I think Algerians are also very realistic about what they want and what they can change. To a certain extent, it will have to be about having less demands and making things move slowly. But again, and this is maybe النقطة وين حكون فيها شوي متشائمة, we need to keep in mind that this is a country that has been devastated, between quotes, by 20 years of statu quo. But the cultural, the economic, the socio-economic devastation is so strong that the road to democracy is going to be long. But I'm not saying we won't reach it, but I'm saying it will be bumpy.
Amal? So no economy. at all?
Say again, sorry?
So there's no economy in Algeria at all. So
Well,
what's there?
I would not put it this way. No. Actually, we've seen a few years of economic prosperity, and everyone has benefited of this prosperity. So we cannot say that there was no economic activity in Algeria, but the issue was the choice of the economic model that, again, by its nature, was strongly dependent on one sector, which is the hydrocarbons. And this actually has, the gentleman that has mentioned it is right, that sometimes the rulers in place were not rushing to open the economy to foreign investment because they did not feel that they had to work on the attractiveness of the country, as long as we had very important earnings thanks to the oil and gas exports. And the second thing is that is worth to mention is that status quo, this inertia also has impacted drastically the private sector. We have unfriendly investment terms even for the nationals. There is indeed activity, and the private sector is employing more than 60% of the labor, so there is an economy. But the business climate is unfriendly, and this is maybe what the gentleman is trying to describe as an economic freeze. So what is the option today? We cannot afford to the statu quo. We cannot afford to continue with this inertia, because what will happen will not even benefit even if the military regime will take over. It will not be in its interests to create this economic inertia, because it will backlash on them. We cannot create another social unrest. We have to somehow appease this tension, and we have to be inclusive of the youth. We have to be inclusive and of the private sector also, that has suffered a lot from a discrimination with respect to the public sector that is strong, and also with a role of the state that is very present and ruling the economy. I mean, we need less state-ruled economy. So this is the second point. And the third point is that we have no other option than working again of an economic recovery. And that's the only way to buy again, if I could put it this way, the social rest.
Can you remind us of the size of the oil and gas industry in Algeria?
The oil and gas industry contributes for 35% of the national GDP. It also constitutes the 2/3 of the tax income, and is 75% of the state budget. So if we can't go back to the break-even, actually we need a price of $100 to reach a break-even to balance the national budget, and we can't afford it. So there is no other option than opening the economy, going for a more or freer market, being more attractive, and working on better terms for investment.
Subsidies cost a lot of money to the state. We are unfortunately in what is called in sociology paradigm paternalist, which means a paternalistic paradigm in which there is this deal between the population and the state, in which the population says, okay, we are a very rich country, we give you our oil, but you give us subsidies. Everything is almost free in Algeria. Hospitals, schools, everything is subsidized by the state. It doesn't cost anything, almost anything to the citizen. And I wrote a piece for Elcano in 2017 that was a bit premonitory, exactly. I think the title was Algeria Revolts Before Protests Turn Revolutionary, in which reforms, before revolts turn revolutionary, in which I explained that actually we need a system in which the subsidies do not go to all the population like that. We need a system of, something more selective. But again, when the drop in oil prices happened in Algeria in 2014, the government has been very cautious about not touching to subsidies because they didn't want to repeat the scenario of October 5th, 1988, when they touched to the prices of oil and sugar, and then the population took up to the street. But today, I think the Algerian citizen, as he showed a high level of maturity, needs also to understand that the system of subsidies cannot go on.
I mean, but this is the most difficult thing to market, particularly in a context of, authoritarianism still resilient. Another question? Yes.
Thank you. So my name is Lori Haitaya, and I'm the MENA director of an organization called Natural Resource Governance Institute. So we do work on oil and gas. So thank you for the introduction about the importance of oil and gas. Actually, I have 3 questions, and one of them is before all of this Hirak happening, there were talks about some reforms in the oil and gas sector. And I know that they were talking more about new taxation regimes, more fiscal rules that will be in favor of private sector coming in and not be the sole exclusivity of Sonatrach. So I was wondering what's happening now in the process. I know that maybe there are other priorities, but where are we on that timeline? Are we still thinking of these reforms now with the situation? Are we more into going more of liberalizing the market? And what is the situation with Sonatrach? We know the leadership has been changed, so what is happening with Sonatrach? I think everybody is interested to know about that. If you can give us a couple of minutes about that, it will be really interesting. The other question that is as a follow-up to what Dalia has said, the bargain was that you give me everything as a people, I get everything for free, and you hold on to power, and I don't ask you about it. And it seems that this is a bit changing because of these new corrupt systems and businessmen taking hold of things, and people feel that this is not working anymore. We're not getting all the benefits, and at the same time, we're not getting democracy. And telling me that the military will stay in control, so how much political inclusion will be, or how much the military will give away and open up the political sphere and democracy? Does the military and what the military wants to control the country and democracy make sense in Algeria? And how much they will, the citizens will be able to bargain with the military about the space, open up the space, because the people are asked to accept the unpopular decisions, economic decisions that will be taken. And that requires a high level of trust. So is the population trusting that these people will make this painful economic, they will accept these painful economic solutions at the same time that they will gain something in counterpart, maybe more political participation or something like that, or else I don't see how people will accept to give something away and not get anything in return. So thank you.
Thank you. Maybe another question, yes, before.
Okay, my name is General Qasim Jammour, retired Brigadier General in the Lebanese Army. Actually, I want to highlight on 2 points. First point about, you spoke about Algerian army. I think now the differences in the origin of the military council from Amazigh and Arab, which is changed for the first time from the time of Ben Bella, is a great change in the approach towards the different issues in Algeria. This is my opinion. But just another thing, you spoke about the subsidies. I think the subsidies is the right of the people. We don't have to speak about subsidies and how to just make a small portion of subsidies for people. We have to speak about good governance. Because if we go to the way the advices from the donors and IMF, and you have to just limit the subsidies, then you will go to civil war. You have to go and speak about good governance. Algeria have big resources. The resources in Algeria are more than enough to give all people good subsidies for all people. Good governance can save the country. But if you speak in this way that people have to watch and say that they cannot have all subsidies for free, then you will go to civil war because the resources are more than enough. This is my opinion.
Okay. So I think most of the questions are addressed to...
I will start from the last actually statement. Actually, I totally agree with you have just mentioned. And as I evoked earlier, the national business agenda, for instance, that we have worked on that is consensual and that actually started to compile propositions from the basis to the top had one very important axis, and that was the governance of the economy. So it's a real key point. And if, say, we have an economy that is managed in a different way, of course, we can reach the level of efficiency without a level of efficiency that is expected from such an economy that used to have, not later than 2 years ago, stronger fundamentals in a more efficient way. And the second aspect you have mentioned is that, of course, I mean, subsidies are important, and people are indeed aware that we will go through difficult years and where their resilience will be important. But again, this joins the lady's statement. It requires a legitimate and trustworthy regime. So these are the two prerequisite conditions to achieve that. And going back to the importance of the, what is happening in the oil and gas sector, indeed, there was this idea of trying to improve the investment conditions, and as you may know, as you are active in the sector, since now more than 5 years, we have failed to attract, strong players to the market because the commercial terms were not attractive anymore. There were maybe 3 or 4 even bid rounds that were totally unsuccessful to trying to develop the upstream that is the development of the exploration and production, trying to have more volumes in Algeria, which is actually badly needed today, that we are failing even to deliver the OPEC quotas, which is very critical. So yes, it has been quite a failure. And with regard to this, there is the new hydrocarbon law that is being drafted, and I will put 2 quotes, since at least 3 years, and we are still waiting for it. And it is anticipating better tax terms and better commercial terms with a larger participation and ease of transferring also the dividends, which is really important. So then, coming back to the instability within the sector, I think that with the different regimes, for the first time we have seen a succession of 6 ministers of energy within a short period of time, which also has made everyone uncomfortable. So again, if we come back with a government that will take into considerations all this experience, because today, I mean, we are enriched with this, experience. Well, it's worth what it's worth, and we need to go to the next step and to the next level. Today, the danger is that not only we are failing to deliver the OPEC quota, but we could not also attract enough investors to increase the volumes and to invest in the refineries. So, I mean, there is no other choice than really having an attractive hydrocarbon law that everyone is looking forward to finally see. There was maybe another aspect. Sonatrach. Well, Sonatrach, interesting topic. Again, there is a vision for the energy transition. So I think that this is the positive thing. This vision and this roadmap is not the property of the previous CEO. It's not the property of the previous minister either. It has been built on a very pragmatic way with the recourse to international advisory from the Big Four. The McKinseys were in, the PwC was part of the equation too. So I think that the roadmap is there. So who's leading Sonatrach today is not, according to me, really important. The one who took over from the previous CEO is somebody from Sonatrach that used to be the vice president of the upstream. So Sonatrach is between two good hands, but what we are looking forward to is the promulgation of this new text of law and, above all, a legal stability.
Haitham, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, if I may add something on the energy issue. As Dalia mentioned, the problem is not that the production is not... Sorry, Amal. It's good. This time I didn't change your last name, it's your name. Sorry, Amal. Amal mentioned it's not only that the production is not enough or increasing, the revenue is down, the consumption, local consumption of energy is out of control, and investments are not arriving. But according, I think, to the US administration, Algeria has the third or the fourth largest shale reserves of oil and gas in the world, which require long-term investments, and obviously a totally different environment than the one that Algeria has nowadays. One comment actually on transitions. I think right now the big dilemma or the pulse in Algeria is between two terms, replacement and transition. The regime wants replacement of faces. Elections, we have a new face, that's it. I think the population is asking for transition to new rules of the game. New rules of the game that are more inclusive and allowing for better handling and good governance that was mentioned. And this links to what Amal said, which is in any democratic transition in the world, there are losers in the process and there are painful decisions and costs to pay. But two elements are very important. Trust. So you trust those in charge and you trust that you can remove them and you trust that there will be checks and balances, and legitimacy. So if there's a legitimate process, like in the case of the neighboring Tunisia, having an independent commission for elections, instance, whatever, independent des élections, to have them supervise those elections and to trust the result and to think that there will be a peaceful transfer of power, which Tunisia proved that it is possible, it's next door, then we may start thinking of transition, which is not happening yet as of now. And finally, one comment on the military. According to the CIPRI Institute in Stockholm, Algeria is the largest arms importer in Africa, in the African continent, the largest by far. I think it was in 2017, Algeria accounted for more than half of the arms imports at the continental level. That has massive implications. Obviously, I mean, for all those deals and for the expenditure and where does that money go, where is this money taken from, et cetera, et cetera. So just keep that figure in mind. Algeria used to import more than the rest of the African continent combined.
Any other question? No? What seems to be difficult now is that, do people is the Algerian leadership aware of the economic, do they have a sense of urgency? Are they fully aware of the need that they have to work on structural reforms of the whole system, or are they just simply obsessed with replacing some figures, implementing some cosmetic change and basically holding on to power and doing this, continuing this pattern of change without real change? But the economy, the Arab Spring, the 2011 Arab Spring, although it was produced to a great extent by the economic deterioration of the whole region. But no one seemed to prioritize any structural reform of the economy, whereas I think the difference today is that, everybody has in mind the necessity to change something in the way national resources are being managed and distributed. And it is also about economic inclusiveness. So I don't know, is it something debated in Algeria? Is it something that, I know that you said the Hirak doesn't have leaders, but I mean, is it something that is discussed in Algeria, in the press, in the social media, or is it simply focused on changing the nature of the regime, the political sort of makeup of the regime, instead of focusing on economic priorities?
Well, this question, of course, came on the table, and although we speak a lot about the political transition, economic issues have raised. And speaking about the concern of the ruling elite, even if it's a transition or replacement government, if that's on top of their agenda, obviously not, because nothing has happened so far. We've been alerting the different governments since 5-6 years, and even on a very regular basis, there are contributions from experts, again, from associations, from the civil society, from different arms of the business community on this crisis on the coming, but nothing was done to the benefit, again, of the election calendar that used to happen not later than a month ago. That was in 28th of April. So again, they took the risky choice to ignore all the alerts to run their political agenda. So, although knowing what would happen. But again, now that we have this replacement government, I think that, many of you have seen that this replacing government is rejected. So how can they not be trusted and conduct unpopular measures? It will not work. So today, if we are, can I put it, optimistic on terms of calendar and not on terms of political choice, if we are optimistic and if say we have a transition government within the 3 months, maybe we will have a kind of drafted roadmap with economic priorities in terms of urgent measures to take on the spot to stop this bleeding of the financial situation, because we need to act on 2 levels. The first of them is the very fragile financial situation, and the second one is the economic recovery, which is the revival of the growth, which will come on a more medium term, on the longer run. So these are 2 levels, and if we don't act immediately on the financial crisis, we'll actually do something that nobody had witnessed, which is accelerating it. Because the fundamentals are still deteriorating, and we are wasting important resources that can be invested in building a diversified economy.
Yep. Maybe
last note. I agree with you, but I think we need to be a bit pragmatic. Economic reforms cost money. Right now, Algeria doesn't have the money to do it. We are talking about a government that benefited in the 2000 era on a barrel at $132, and yet they didn't conduct the necessary economic reform for the diversification of the Algerian economy. So now it will be very hard to do it, especially that the same government needs a barrel at $96 to continue its spending. But I think what is easier right now is to do the political reforms, because they don't cost money, right? So let us be pragmatic about that. The political reforms, where the people are asking for, is for no elections. The election cannot be run with the government of Badawi that people do not trust. So the best way forward is for the 3 Bs to resign, for a new government to be constituted or for a national assembly to be constituted, and then take a minimum of 6 to 9 months to organize the elections. And then, once the people trust the constituency, the institution that they chose, at this moment we can, on va dire, faire passer la pilule and convince them that some economic reforms are needed, and they will have, you know, to serrer la ceinture, if I may say. But right now, this government is not trusted. Actually, politicians are not trusted. So,
okay. Younes?
I think the Algerian government is really not very lucky, because if they have to adopt these type of economic reforms, given the economic environment around the world, where would they go? They go for privatization and more liberal policies. That will make things even worse. Look at Syria before the civil war, for instance. So I think that the choices are very limited, and do not exclude the fact that until now, Libya hasn't come back again on the oil and gas sector yet. If it comes back, it's one of the major competitors to Algeria in the region. So the choices are very limited. If you keep going the way you go, you won't have enough money to do it. If you go for privatization, that's shock therapy. It might work for 3-4 years. Then the backlash will come, like we've seen in other countries.
I'm afraid we have to conclude, but I'm very thankful to our panelists, not only because they gave us a very exhaustive picture of the situation in Algeria, but also because they stressed economic aspects. This is something that is usually completely ignored by most of our colleagues in think tanks, because we tend to focus on macro politics, on geopolitics, and we don't focus enough on economic inclusion. And I think this is one of the most important and urgent aspects to deal with in the case of Algeria. And I would conclude, I remember reading a book in the 1990s when there was hope that the Arab world would join the wave of democratization that was going on elsewhere in the world. The issue was, is it possible to have, is economic pain justifiable? Economic pain is justifiable if you have political gain, but if not, if everything remains as it is, it's difficult to cut subsidies. It's difficult to inflict, economic pains on societies with no political gains. And I think this is the most. This is the dilemma, for the Algerian regime. Please join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you very much.